All right, everybody. Rob Coldwell here on this episode of Living Well with Rent Well. I have from New York State, Mr. Brian Green here. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you a little bit. We've never met before. We're in the same mastermind group. This mastermind group is a lot of hard-charging individuals, family men. We look for the balance in life, but most of us are very driven. And what I love about your story and how it parlays perfectly into what this Living Well with Rent Well, the real estate management and development. You had some retail businesses. You sold those businesses. Then you got into, take us through the self-management process of your real estate, then into construction. And I'd really love to spend some time on the development side of what you're working on with your Green Springs Capital group.
Absolutely, Rob. So, like you said, my background, at least originally coming out of college, was retail. So I owned and operated Verizon wireless stores all over upstate New York and into Western Massachusetts and through Vermont. I did that for 11 years. I built it up to 23 locations. And then towards the end in 2014, I kind of pulled back a little bit down to 15 stores, and then ultimately sold the entire group of stores to a larger company from the West Coast. And then immediately thereafter, I think maybe 90 days later, I bought my first small multifamily property. I didn't really know what I was doing. I read a couple books on real estate. I had some cash from the sale of my company. So, I kind of did everything the wrong way. I bought it all cash. I started trying to do maintenance myself. I mean, I'm not the handiest guy in the world. I can do some lawn care and landscaping work, but painting and fixing things inside was not my skill set. So I kind of just jumped right into it, just from reading the books and realizing that I definitely did not want to go get a regular job. I hadn't worked for anybody else since college. So I had no intention of doing so at that point. So I kind of just jumped right into it and started figuring it out. And, it kind of evolved from there.
And how small was the small multifamily? I find that there's a range on small multifamily.
Yeah, this was a 4-unit building, all 1 bedrooms. It was, an older building, maybe 100 plus years old, but it had a lot of character, which I like. And we still have that in our properties today. Like all the inside walls in the building were brick. It had high ceilings. It was an older building. So it has a lot of charm and character, and it was mostly already redone. So I bought it from another real estate investor who was local to the market, and he had taken it from, basically a rundown drug house into a nice building. And then I just kind of took it and implemented some professional management as I figured it out, not all at first. Right. And kind of just operated for cash flow.
Any books that come to mind for those looking at that small multifamilies that you found valuable?
I mean, I have read basically every real estate book that is out there. But at first, I worked myself through all of the Bigger Pockets books back then, Brandon Turner's books, like all the step-by-step ones. I remember reading Landlording on Autopilot. I think the author's name is Butler. He was a former police officer.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, so he's
running people's background checks from his squad car, yes, collecting rent in between everything. That was classic.
Yep, I still quote parts of that book now inside my company. He talked a lot about not making exceptions. Right, if you make exceptions, it'll just destroy you in property management. Right. Exceptions with your tenants, exceptions with how you operate. So that was a good one. And then I think Millionaire Real Estate Investor was another one. There's a multitude of them. And
Is that the Gary Keller one?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. So wonderful. I love you says I read them all, Rob. Like, give me more data. Yeah. I can apply it to this 4-unit building, because where the story really, I'm not going to say takes a turn, but you've gone all in. Like, you're now managing how many doors?
So we only manage for ourselves, and we have just over 100 doors, all within basically 2 counties right now. Um, and there's a mix of that. It's mostly small multifamilies all the way up to, we have 3 buildings that are around 20 units. And then just recently, we'll probably get to it, but we just recently started implementing short-term rentals within those buildings as well. It's kind of like a hybrid investing approach to maximize cash flow where we could. Our town, the main town we're in, Saratoga Springs, is a pretty big tourist destination in the summer. We have the oldest horse racing track in the country.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
all of the horses from the Derby and the Belmont, they all come up here for the entire summer. So you can imagine um, everyone from the Northeast and anyone that's affiliated with horse racing, they'll come to Saratoga for a week or a weekend in July and August, and our economy just explodes.
And the rents are worth it. What do you do the other 9 months on the short term rentals?
Yeah, so our economy, even without the tourism, is fantastic. So we have a good mix of state government employees. Since we're very close to Albany, we're only 30 miles away. So a lot of them live in Saratoga County, which is just
Okay.
north. We have a great deal of private industry. So Global Foundries, which is one of the biggest chip manufacturers in the world, their largest manufacturing facility literally in the world is in Malta, which is a suburb of Saratoga. And they recently are expanding that to be a total of a $10 billion facility. And then we have 5 universities and colleges all within 20 minutes of us. So there's a huge influx of economic drivers coming from all different directions. So
And are
in the off season,
do
we rent midterm rentals. So nurses, professionals driving to the area, students transferring in different colleges. We kind of do 9 months of midterm and then 3 months of short term.
right.
Yeah.
And are the one bedrooms or the larger more bedrooms more popular? Do you do it with a mix? What have you found?
Yeah. So to this point, most of ours are 1 and 2 bedroom because they're apartments inside of our small multifamily buildings. They're just really, really well located. So they're within walking distance to the racetrack or to downtown. And, we found that they both do pretty well. We're going to be converting even more of them, a lot more of them this year to short-term rentals. I think that the normal consensus is the more bedrooms, the better for short-term rentals. But I guess it also depends on who you want your guests to be.
Right.
Like more bedrooms, you're going to get bigger parties and more problems maybe. So sometimes 1 or 2 bedrooms maybe is better.
And have you had to recapitalize any of these properties since you started doing this? And were there any questions from any lenders or appraisers? Have you crossed that bridge?
Yeah, so we invest with long-term plans. We buy a building, we don't ever expect to sell it. Although we have sold a couple small ones when it made sense. But so our strategy is, in fact, to refinance every, I don't know, call it 3 to 7 years, depending on where the market's at and where lending is. And yes, there are certain lenders that do not like short-term renters. They call it hospitality, so they either give you worse terms or they won't lend on it. But I found that in most things with lending, it's just a matter of making enough phone calls. We usually finance with local banks, and we found 2 or 3 of them that are perfectly fine with short-term rentals. They don't see any issue with it because they know that our fallback plan would be long-term, right? So short-term is going to make more, and the worst-case situation is we go back to long-term. So they'll appraise the property based on projected long-term rents.
Okay.
In most cases. Sometimes they'll give you a boost on short term, but it's all just knowing your lenders and operating with the
Right.
ones that are okay with it.
And what type of increased top line numbers are you seeing from that average 2 bedroom to now on that was a traditional 12-month lease to now a short term?
I would say it's somewhere in the 2.5 to 3x range on gross revenue. Now, of course, you have utilities to cover. It's furnished. There's ancillary expenses. We do a lot more inspections on our short-term rentals to make sure that our inventory and things like that are up to par. But the cleaning fee is absorbed by the guests, and we manage it in house, so we're not paying any type of percentage premium to anybody else. So we're just finding ways to make it work, and it's worked so well that we're going to 4x the number of short-term rentals we're going to have in our portfolio this year.
You're going to four. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 2.5, 3 times. And then, yes, you're obviously going to have more operating expenses. What I like about, we've done the similar model in one of the previous episodes, the McManus Holding Group. What we're just doing right now is an arbitrage model where we're renting it with a 20 to 25% premium, and they take care of everything.
Okay.
And what I think is going to happen is when they move, if we move on from that model, I have a nicer apartment than the average tenant who stayed there for 2 or 3 years. It's really been well kept. And as you said, your own team is going in there and inspecting more and more. And to keep those really good reviews, you need to do that. I mean, you are in the hospitality space at that point. And
Absolutely. And to your point, if you get the apartment back, now it's also completely furnished. So even if you're going to rent it as a long-term rental, you'll be able to get a premium, most likely because it's nicely appointed.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the Verizon stores. We've sold the Verizon stores.
Yeah.
Then over the next, call it 15 years, you're buying 4 to 20 units at a time. You're not selling much. You're putting long-term debt on them. I'm assuming you're using a mix of your own capital and then some private money,
Yeah. So
maybe
it's
some
actually,
construction loans.
yeah. So actually, we just started buying in 2015. So it's been about 7+ years in real estate. But yes, so we have self-funded. At first, it was just me self-funding with the proceeds from the sale of my old company, and then using bank lending to kind of increase leverage. And then when my brother came on in 2018 as a partner, then we both kind of doubled our capital that we could deploy on our own. We have raised some capital, but we've done it with private notes, so just debt. And we've used that to kind of bridge some of the gap on the front end with construction. So our lender, in most cases, will lend 80% of the purchase and renovation expense on a construction loan. And then, we normally would have to bring the 20%, but we even leveraged that even a little bit further, and brought on 10% of the necessary capital in private notes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. There's one lender here in PA that will do 80% of purchase and 100 of construction. And It's just, what a nice product that is. It really adds up. I mean, some of these construction budgets that we're working on are $1 million, an extra $200,000, and that doesn't need to be raised or doesn't need to be just available for that. It really can speed things up. And I think that some listeners, they're so used to the hard money, that 12%, 2 points, 75% on loan to values and these things. Like, there are these small, that what I'm talking about is a small local bank that knows their market. And we're in the Philadelphia suburbs. They do not lend really in the city of Philadelphia, but they will lend in like 2 or 3 counties that they're comfortable in. And with a good operator, they will allow you to leverage it. And I don't know how that's going to, I don't know if they're always going to do that, if they're just trying to buy market share, but the word's getting out. And it seems like you found some of those same lenders that'll do 80% of the purchase, 80% of the construction. And have you been doing large renovations on these? Are you buying the value add multifamilies at this point?
Yeah. So at first, the first building I bought was basically stabilized. There wasn't a whole lot of work to do. But by the time I got to my third building, I went really from like value add investing to redevelopment. I bought a bank foreclosure at that point, and we started at that point spending upwards of $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 an apartment to renovate because the buildings were in such bad condition. And then that's kind of expanded over time. So I don't call it value add investing anymore. I call it redevelopment, because that's really what we're doing. We're changing the entire profile of the building, so it's a little bit different than putting down LVT and changing out the counters.
Thank you so much for that distinction.
Yeah.
It's such an important distinction. There's so many buildings out there. It's funny. The last few days I was in a training of something called Culture Index. And long story short, if you're a headhunter, you get paid to find a candidate and you're selling the candidate to the employer. Culture Index is almost doing the opposite, saying, let me see if the candidate is actually the right fit based upon the profile that you need. Brian, as a property manager, I'm sometimes a realtor's like nemesis because I'm saying, whoa, 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 slow down. Somebody, all they did on this building was the LVT flooring, paint the cabinets,
Yeah.
right? The floor plan's the same.
Uh-huh.
The I can tell you right now, the wiring is the same, and it's like this cosmetic renovation that the challenge without doing the large renovation yourself is I have investors. I report on all of my projects, whether I have investors or not, because I am the investor, right?
Hmm.
And I could never predict the maintenance. I can never predict the returns because I wouldn't know what the maintenance was. One leak in a sewer line in a drain line on a 3-story building
Yeah.
is going to be expensive.
Hmm.
And oh, I want to put in a microwave above the stove. I don't have the power to do it because it's only 60 amps. And I need to get that apartment to 100, 125 amps. So at 40 to 50, $60,000 for an apartment, what are the types of infrastructure that you're doing to those apartments? So the listeners can get a sense of, okay, this is what Brian means of a redevelopment of an apartment.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So we bought a 20 unit building, and we went through and changed out all the roofs. We resided all of the buildings. We did all of the parking lots. We laid new concrete patios for every single unit. We changed out every single door. We put down LVT, but that's after we ripped up all the old stuff. All new kitchens, entirely new bathrooms, all new lighting fixtures, painted everything. So it's literally the only thing left was the concrete foundation, the
Okay.
framing,
Yep.
and as much drywall as you could save, because drywall is drywall. You can usually repair it with paint and what have you. But everything else, landscaping, everything was redone, and we ended up spending $50,000 per unit on that.
Okay.
So it was over $1 million to redevelop the property.
So that was built post 1960.
That
That
building,
building.
no, nope. That building was probably 50s. I think it was when it was built.
50s. So
50s, yeah.
did you rewire? Were you pulling new service lines to each apartment, or
So
was the power sufficient?
the power was sufficient. It had already been, I mean, maybe upgraded in the 70s.
Okay.
So I think at first they used to be single story buildings, and these were all quadplexes. They were 5 quadplexes in a row.
5 quads.
And
Okay.
at some point they put a second level on the apartment buildings, and they
Got it.
created 4 units instead of 2 is what I imagine. There's no blueprints or anything, but you kind of get into these, as and you kind of just start piecing things together.
Right.
Like, all right, where is everything? Like, what do we need to do? But like you said, all the drains were rotted. So we had to snake everything out to the road. And like, this is like extensive work. Like you have to redo everything. But now that it's done, we have almost no maintenance requests.
Yes.
Everything works. Everything's new. And I think it's the difference between we invest for wealth creation long-term. And if you're doing a cosmetic renovation, you're really just a flipper. You're flipping the building and you're trying to get a profit and move on to the next one.
Yeah. And when I'm reading the books on the larger multifamily, even when the appraisers are coming out to appraise these buildings,
Mm-hmm.
they usually have the maintenance cost of what it would be for a very large complex with on-site. Oh, we need to unclog a toilet that the tenant can't handle. Great. Let me just get on my golf cart and zip over there. And that's not how that works
Yeah.
with these small multifamilies. And a lot of the investors that I'm up against, and I try to educate because they're all paying me. And I know the maximum that I can pay for this building with 20 years expert in these small multis. And I love the fact that how many of were you able to, did you buy that vacant or did you have to move the tenants out? Were you able to do a building at a time? I mean, that took you some months to do all these. What did that cadence look like on a project like this?
So I don't know from your experience, you probably have seen the same, but when you're going into a redevelopment like this, the tenant profile that is in the building now today, when you buy it, is not going to be the same as when it's done. The rents are, going up 60, 100%. It's a completely different profile. So in the past, on certain circumstances, we've actually brought the occupancy of the building down to zero.
Okay.
So we're providing notices. We actually fund relocation expense to help them move. In many cases, sometimes that goes smoother than others, but it's kind of, we're stuck in some cases. If you want to frame it as like we're the bad guy, we're coming in to change, to kick everyone out. But the reality is the building has been sitting there neglected for 50 years. And now the bill needs to be paid, right? So nobody has fixed it up, taken care of it. So at some point, it's either going to fall down or somebody like us has to step in and redevelop it.
Yes.
So that's what we do. And that one also happened in 2020. So we were right in the middle of COVID. So everyone had moved out by, call it December of 19. Thankfully. And then we started construction. And then when COVID started in New York, we got a lot of limitations put on our contractors on what they could do. So
everything can't be an emergency repair.
Yeah. Well, so
nobody's living there.
At first they shut us down and they said that you couldn't do any construction work. And then they realized that that was a bad idea. So then what they came up with was one person per building could be doing renovation work. So thankfully we had 5 buildings. So we had one contractor in every building doing something. And that went on for months.
And who was checking on that? People actually coming by?
I guess if somebody from the labor department or somebody saw, then I guess they could have said something, but nobody really physically checked. But, we adhered to it as much as we could. But it was definitely a unique situation.
I think a lot of my construction guys, they're smoking so many cigarettes and drinking so many Red Bull. I think they were immune to the virus over the years. And I say that very lovingly and jokingly.
Mm-hmm.
Serious thing. But when I was trying to, here's some mask guys and they would just look at me like, really, dude, like, get out of here, Mr. Khakis. We know what we're doing,
I don't know about you. I kind of put the spin on it like, hey, listen, it doesn't really matter what you and I want to do, but like, I need to be able to have you do the work and I need to be able to pay you for the work. So in order for that to happen, you have to wear the mask and you have to be in one building and at each. So once you threw the money behind it, then they're like, okay, fine.
And you got it done.
Yeah.
So you touched on some great points there where the profile changes. It's been some of them. What we've done is over what we might take a 2-year span, and some of it, like maybe 25%. It's usually like in a building, I feel like 25% are ready to move out anyway. It has nothing to do with you. You have a 20-unit building, you're going to have 5 turnovers a year. Like that's, otherwise that means everybody's staying for 4 years or longer. And then we absolutely try to work with, and I'm glad that you did that in terms of help relocate folks. And when they can't be in one of those quads when you're doing all of this work really safely. I mean, there are ways depending on where the units are and all that, but then it takes a lot longer. And then, so that's now a successful project for you. You've set a 10-year goal. You're running on the EOS platform. It's you and your brother. Is one vision and one integrator?
Technically right now I am both of those roles. My brother is serving as our project manager. So he oversees all of the renovation work, which is extensive in our world. So that's the role he's filling now. And then, as we kind of move along in the process here and starting to get into a little bit more ground up development, I imagine our roles will shift a little bit. He's moving over a little bit into like the acquisitions role for our company. So, it's I had a head start on him in starting the company, 3 years before him. So he's kind of been playing catch up a little bit. But for now, I am the visionary and the integrator.
Nice. And then you have 2 employees. One's on the management side. One's helping with projects.
Yep. One is our property manager who started off as she's a friend of ours. She just was showing apartments for me as an assistant. Maybe when I got to like my 3rd or 4th apartment, I decided I didn't like that part of the business, like going out and showing the apartments. She came on to help, and now she's been with us for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. And now she's our property manager. So she runs all of our leasing. She coordinates all the showings, all that entire side of the building of the business she handles. And then we have a project coordinator who supports my brother as the project manager. And her work is systematizing our construction sites, making sure everyone stays on schedule, and kind of filling in the gaps.
So a lot of that property management now, how much of the portfolio at the end of this year will be short term?
Well, it depends. Are we going to meet our acquisition goals or not?
Okay, so out of what you already own,
Of
out of those
what,
100 or so doors.
yeah, okay. So what we already own, we will have 14 or 15 short-term rentals. So call it 14, 15%. And then we are working to bring on third-party clients only in the short-term space.
Okay.
And only for properties that have potential, to make it worth our time. So basically, we're talking about houses on the lake or houses that are right near the track, high revenue type buildings that need professional short-term management. And hopefully we're doing so for other investors. We're not so interested in doing it for, the part-time homeowners that want to rent that out when they're not there. We want other investors that have a business perspective and kind of, will be kind of partners in that management. So hopefully we get to 20 altogether. That's the goal.
20. Okay.
20. Yeah.
All right. So now we've set this stage here.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I think is so cool, because I have your Facebook page pulled up. So I'd recommend anybody look at the Brian Green Facebook page for this Green Springs Capital Group. I get really everything what you're doing. It's like, love it. And now I'm looking at this rendering of 6 condos and 36 apartments.
Yep.
I'm getting excited, man. And what's great is, and what I love about this show is that we're going to talk some high level, but then you're going to help us walk us through, because a lot of the listeners we're getting ready to saying, okay, in my area right now, some of these commercial brokers who are not real estate investors are pricing these apartments that are 50 plus years old at almost the cost that I believe I could build that apartment for and be brand new. Mm-hmm. Maybe not all the entitlements and the land and everything else that goes into it. And for me, that's a huge blind spot that I just, I'm actually a relatively cautious person in some ways, and the spreadsheets. We both have that finance degree and the numbers and the workbooks, and like we're not micromanagers. We're actually control freaks, at least I can say that about myself, having read a profile, and I want to know like what the future holds and what certain things will cost. So you're building 42 unit subdivision project, 6 condos, 36 apartments. Take it from there, my friend. Like bury us, bore us with the numbers, but these listeners want to know what is in store for you. What about the land? How much? Like how much and how long did all that take? And what was there? Now I'm assuming it's raw land, the sewer tie-ins, the power. Like what did you not know you didn't know? And I hand it over to.
So I think it's important to realize that the impetus for us getting into ground up development was just a lack of deal flow and us being frustrated with running numbers on existing buildings and just not being able to get anything to pencil out. So I went through that at the early part of last year. During that process, I made just a regular phone call to a guy that used to be a commercial mortgage broker. And at the time I thought he still was. And he told me that he had left he was no longer a broker and he was off on his own doing consulting work. And part of that was development and financial analysis of developments, construction budgeting, et cetera. So, I had that in the back of my mind. And then, as I'm digging through whatever's on the market for weeks on end and not seeing much of anything, this one property keeps popping up that has 8 old apartments on it. It's an old, I call them Franken houses. They're old Victorian houses that are cut into like a million different apartments, and none of it makes any sense.
Franken houses. We're gonna give you credit.
I think I probably stole that from somebody else, but I use it all the time. Yeah.
There's nothing new or original, but you Franken houses.
Franken houses. Yeah. So it's a 2.5 acre parcel, and there's an old I call it a Victorian house in the middle of the property that's 4,000 square feet. And, there's a carriage house that's another 2,000 square feet. In our market, carriage houses are like a big thing. It's kind of like a auxiliary dwelling unit, but
Yeah,
old.
big money going up to Saratoga Springs when
Yeah, yeah,
yours were made turn
yeah,
of the century, right?
yeah. That's right. So there's also a garage and then some other ancillary stuff. But the apartments are in, let's call it, really rough condition. They've been not maintained, and there's a tremendous amount of we'll call it deferred maintenance, to be kind, meaning like holes in the walls, and there's probably more animals living in the building than people. But so we started looking at it, and I was speaking to this gentleman, and I said, all right, how do I make sense of this? Because I can figure out what it's going to be worth if we build something there, but like I don't know enough about like the ground up development process and like the zoning, that what's allowed. And so he and I just worked through that over the course of a couple months and became comfortable enough with the numbers, at least I was, that I said, all right, I think this makes a lot of sense. Like there's a ton of meat on the bone here if we can get this right. So then we just started, like you said, we started on a spreadsheet, and then it goes from there. You go and meet with the city and see what their appetite is for this kind of project. And you kind of follow that path as far as you can so you get a comfort level. And then we made an offer on the property, and it was completely contingent on us getting entitlements and all the permitting done. So we're technically still now under contract because we don't have final site plan approval yet or the building permits. So
let's pause there.
Yep, go ahead.
Because you just gave us a lot.
Yep.
So big parcel, 2.5 acres. I almost said frankincense, but Frankenstein. Am I saying it correctly?
Frankenhouse. Yeah.
We've seen these. We know what you're talking about, right? Where it's just like, oh my God, like this is going to be a fortune. I've done one of these and it was $1,000,001. I thought I was going to spend 600 with the carriage house and the parking lot and the fences and thank God they gave me an extra 2 units to be able to do it and make it's still penciled at the end of the day. So because they're beautiful old buildings from the outside with your glasses off.
Yeah.
And the community really likes them, I would think, but they don't like what they are right now. So you have to make that argument that we're not talking about restoring this. We're talking about leveling this ground, and then you were smart. You had a broker turned consultant that could help you on the development side. So instead of taking a year, you got it done in a few months for you to get comfortable with what it was, because I think a lot of us can say, I get how I can value 36 apartments and 6 condos on the back end, but what is this thing gonna take to get it to that point? Fair enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you mentioned scraping the property, and that was our initial plan because that makes the most financial sense, right? Let's get rid of the buildings and let's build everything brand new from the ground up. So once we started getting into the process, we realized that there was a good amount of pushback from local organizations, neighborhood groups, and actually the planning board to maintain the old buildings because they were, although not designated as historical, they were eligible to be historical on the New York State Registry.
Okay.
So we had 2 choices. We either keep going on the same path and just see if we can get enough votes on the planning board, and there's going to be all kinds of conversation, we'll say, as the project goes on from people that don't like the fact that we're going to tear the buildings down. And I felt like this is our biggest project to date. This is our first ground up development. We probably want to do this in a way where the PR surrounding the project is more positive. So we sat down with our architects and our engineers and tried to figure out what we could do. Of course, the house is right in the middle of the lot. So, you can't build apartments around it. It's going to look weird and it's never going to work. So ultimately I suggested, why don't we move the house? So we were like, all right, well, what's that look like? So we called an engineer, a company that's specific in picking up buildings and moving them to different locations, and got a quote on that. And then we started talking it through. And like, all right, maybe this makes some sense. And like you said, it's going to take a ton of money to renovate the old building and the carriage house, which is why the only way to do it and make any financial sense is to sell them off as condos instead of converting them to apartments. So that piece is really core to the project, because without doing that part, we can't get the 36 apartments on the property that we want. So this was kind of the way it was going to work. And probably now that I know it now, why every other developer in town didn't want to touch the property. Because he knew how many he or she would know how many hoops they would have to jump through. But me being a novice in the ground up development game, I was like, oh yeah, sure, we'll just pick it up and move it, and this will be easy. So that's how we ended up where we are.
Brian, are you able to see my screen?
I am, yes, yep.
Okay, cool. Never done this before, so this is a first on the show. So here we have this is you have the garage, or is that the carriage house?
That's the carriage house, yep, and the house.
And then that's the main house. That was 4,000 feet.
4,000. Well, it's a little bit larger now, but some of it's these old houses they add on a back porch, and then
sure,
decking going random places. So all the old stuff all the new stuff, new in quotation marks, will be taken off. The old house will remain.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're moving that from the center of the lot down closer to the street, and you said those are going to be condos.
Yes. Somewhere between 6 and 8. More is probably better, but I think at 6 still pencils out. So that's what we're projecting.
And maybe your management company will manage the condos afterwards, you think? You need to form an association?
I don't know. I'm not sure if we want to get in the HOA game.
I don't blame you. Okay. So when you did the agreement of sale, you gave yourself plenty of time to figure this out?
Yes, that's right. So
what does that look like?
I want to say 7, 8 months. So our normal closing date as per the contract is supposed to be next month, February. But we have built in extensions, because I knew that even though I've never done anything to this scale before, I knew that our municipality, our city, could take a long time in providing approvals, and I didn't want to get stuck in a situation where we had to close before approvals. So now I negotiated in to have 4 extensions, 90 days each. So basically, we have an extra year if we need it. And every time we do an extension, we just have to contribute another $10,000 deposit, which will be non-refundable. But if we ultimately close, it'll be credited toward the purchase.
So the deposit is hard at this point?
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And because from my experience in a past life, I would take gas stations and redevelop them into drive-through grocery stores. And you would think that every municipality would love to take the old gas station that's no longer in use and see a beautiful barn that sells milk through the convenience of their car. And the timing that they can take is up to them. Like, it could just keep going and going.
Absolutely.
And going.
Absolutely correct. Yes.
So you took the path of least resistance, and you, in some ways, and you said, okay, for this to pencil, you got creative. Your personality type is very much integrator and visionary. I think you're one of the 3% of the people in the country that has that mind to be able to do that. Good for you. And those condos are going to help recapitalize the project, I'm assuming, by selling them.
Absolutely. And actually, what we thought was going to be a problem actually is going to be marginally profitable.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And you do get, because there is something to be said about preserving the integrity, the history of these structures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
So, it's we brought this plan you're looking at here in front of the planning board, and it got really positive reception. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever brought them a proposal that included something like this. But when they saw that we were actively working with our local preservation society and trying to cooperate on this, and that we were going to go through the effort it was going to take to save the buildings, it actually is going to end up giving us slightly more density than zoning would allow for. But so far, they seem to think that that's a reasonable trade-off.
And the alternative is, we've all seen this where the old building is left in the center, the new buildings are built around them, and now you have a clubhouse, or I never see anybody in those for the most part. You have like a treadmill that's collecting dust, and to renovate that, to be able to have it safe and habitable and part of this project, just that didn't pencil out. And that's probably what a lot of developers were originally thinking about doing with it. About how much do you think it's going to be to move that building?
To move it, we've got a verbal quote of $100K, and that's about 75 for the house and 25 for the carriage house. Now that doesn't count, we have to build new foundations for them that they're going to sit on top of. Yes. We're going to basically got the insides before we move them, so they'll be a little bit lighter.
Okay.
Because we're going to reconfigure the entire layout inside anyways, and replumb, re-electric, everything will be new. So, to be honest, the demolition cost was going to be about 100K too. So those two numbers are kind of a wash. You're really just dealing with the hard costs and a lot of soft costs on design work for the old buildings.
Oh, man. Road trip to Saratoga Springs. Man, I want to see this. This is so cool.
Yeah.
The other buildings are going to be apartments,
Yes.
I'm assuming. So if I can do quick math, you said there's 36 of those?
That's right.
Okay. So like kind of 3 quads sandwiched together and then 3 of them?
Yeah, each of those.
Is that how the design is? Are they?
Each of those 3 buildings is 12 units.
Okay.
So there's ground level flats, which are kind of like the whole unit isn't on the first floor side by side. And then on the second and third floors, because there's 3-story, they'll be more like townhouse row style. So all exterior entrances, we didn't want any common space because obviously common space equals ongoing maintenance and cleaning and common area utilities. So everything right now is, I think on this project, it's 40 something thousand square feet and maybe 500 of it is common space.
Ooh, love that.
Which is only because we have to have the water meters indoors somewhere. So we will have to have a house meter for that. But we wanted to eliminate any elevators and hallways and things that need to be cleaned every week. Because as you know, that just reduces the value of the property.
Sure. I have one really successful investor, and what he would do with his buildings is he would build it into the lease, and when he would do his renovations, every light in the hallway, besides the emergency lights, were wired to the apartment. The challenge with that is if the property manager doesn't able to enforce the lease, you end up with all these different types of light bulbs, and some people would figure it out and then unscrew their light bulb and all that. But so you've gotten what I would call the E-myth. You've solved it at the root. 500 square feet of common area, which is going to be for your water meters. Every apartment is going to have its own heater. It's going to have its own. Do you separate the water from once it comes into the street? Will you have those types of systems that you'll be able to bill it back if you want to?
I don't believe so, but we do, as just standard practice, we charge a monthly water and sewer fee to our tenants. So usually that's just a flat amount. Normally it's around $25 a month, and it's written into the lease. So we don't separate the metering. I believe in our municipality we'd only be able to do that if they were condominiums. So for now it'll just be probably 3 different water meters, and we'll just bill it back to the tenants.
Got it. In our area, if you disclose it to the resident, you can charge the same charges that the municipality would charge you, which is the connection fee and a metering fee. Because the cost of water, see, I have to change my pronunciation, Brian. I'm more of a water guy being outside of Philly, but I have to say water.
Yes.
Is expensive, like really expensive. Like just to have the connections to the apartments, $60, $70 in some of our municipalities.
Wow.
So when we're going through, we're putting in the meters, and then the lease is very specific that they have a connection fee and they have a meter fee, and then they have whatever they're using for the water and the sewer based upon I can put you in contact with a firm that like specializes in this. It's actually one of our original episodes. And any other listeners, just reach out. It's something that has been really helpful for us. We had one building that we took over. It was 6 units, and back-to-back months we had a $2,500 water bill because a toilet was just running, and it was the one unit that we didn't get into when we did our lock change system. So it was the one unit that the plumber, when he was doing some, the tank checks with the food dye, and like just a lot of times visual, you can just see it and hear it, and did it hurt. So now we changed our process a little bit. But when it's master metered, man, that stuff's it's tough. And then there's I don't want to go too much of a tangent on this, but there's a lot of reporting that can be done automatically to say you have a water leak in unit 16, because they'll measure it throughout the day. And then if it's still going at like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, that's when they kind of know, hey, like we probably have a problem here. So
Yeah. Okay.
how much was the land for this?
So the land acquisition is 1.6 million, and that includes the existing buildings.
Okay. And then
And
how much do you think you'll have before? This is where I always get confused. Like
Mhm.
the zoning and the engineers and the studies and then the renderings and then the presentations and then the rework this and let me go figure that out and get
Yep.
more architects and more engineers. What do you think you'll be in for what are those costs technically called?
Well,
Is
we
there a
have,
category for those in development?
I mean, it's just kind of soft costs is how we have the line items, and it's basically a mixture of architectural services, engineering, civil engineering, um, a lot of testing for the site. So we did soil tests, we did an archaeological review, which was required. You have to get a regular survey. You have all these ancillary tests that are required as part of your site plan approval. So figure on a project of this size, we're going to be around 350,000
Okay.
in those type of fees. Now, if you start including all the other holding costs and soft costs, which would be like your construction financing and stuff like that, interest on that, you're looking at somewhere around just over $1 million on this project over the course of from now until the point where it's finished in soft costs, which is 10-11%
Of the overall project.
overall project. So I told you before it's 1.6 for the land, and then our total construction costs on the apartment side will be just over 8 million, and then the construction on the condo portion, well, all in with land and whatnot is like 2.2. So figure it's like 1.9, 1.8 hard costs, including some architectural fees of its own. So all in, we're at like 13.2.
And what does that work out to be if you could separate the condos
Mhm.
from the actual apartments? What do you think that it's going to cost you to build each individual apartment?
Yeah, so with condos, if you take those off, that's 2.3 of it, and then the remainder, so call it 11 million, is for the apartments. So I think that works out to around $315,000 a unit.
Yep. Which is in my market, that's $100,000 more than what they want for an apartment that when I walk through there, I said, this is at the end of its useful life. The floor plan stinks.
Yeah.
There's no wash. You put the washer dryer next to the kitchen table that nobody wants. I can, right?
Yeah.
Like
Uh-huh.
if that stove goes, I don't even know if I have enough power on the panel. Okay. There's
Mm-hmm.
no real sound proofing between any of the apartments. And, this is, Mr. Coldwell, $15,000 is all you need. And you're going to get these rents up through the roof. And I just say,
Yeah,
I'm looking. So you're at 315.
that's right.
And is that number all inclusive of everything? You're giving us the all in number of the land and the development and everything else. So 315,000 for new construction apartments, 36 of them.
In my market, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, it sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but you need to have enough rent revenue on the back end to justify the value that it's going to be worth, right? So if we're spending, what did we say, $11 million in the apartment, as soon as we're done, and we're projecting kind of, I'd call them average rents for new construction in our market, because I'm trying to be conservative everywhere we can right now. So our rents will be $2,500 a unit, and the building will be worth roughly $14 million as soon as it's finished and leased out. So we'll have like a $3 million equity bump on the apartments from start to finish.
Yep. And then you have the condos.
We have the condos. Yep. So the condos, like I said, will cost 2.3 all in. And then we're projecting to be able to sell them anywhere between 500K and 550K. Now, keeping in mind, in this market, within a mile of this site, condos can range anywhere from 400 on the low end to like 1.5, $2 million.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be very conservative. So I think we penciled in 550 per condo times 6 of those. So that's 3.3 million. So we're going to clear about $1 million before, real estate agent commissions and things of that nature.
Yeah.
but there's room above that. Like if we actually get to a more average condo, it might be more like 7 or 750. So in that world, we're going to do much better, but we're trying to make sure that makes sense even at the lower range.
Right.
Yeah.
How big for the apartments? What's the average? Is there an average square footage or an average, like how many one bedrooms, two bedrooms? Are there anything larger than a two bed?
We're going to do them all 2 bedroom, 2 bath. I think the townhouse ones, actually, the ones on the second and third level that have this interior stairs, will be 2.5 baths even, because they'll have a half bath on the main floor and then two upstairs, and they'll all be around 1,100 square feet.
Hmm. That's a nice size apartment,
Yeah.
and it really opens yourself up. There's a topic that I'll be speaking on soon called renovating to your renter.
Okay.
And we're building out this matrix of if it's subsidized housing, here's finishes and materials and what we're thinking, and it goes contrary to what I used to think, where we're putting in some different finishes, higher quality stuff, granite countertops in subsidized housing. Why? Because they'll still be in good condition in 10 years. If you go in an inferior product, it doesn't last, right? And a sweet spot is like an equal number for us to bedrooms to bathrooms, because that does co-living well, that does short-term well, that does the medium term, put nurses or pilots, stewardesses, and then you have the just two couples there. So I think that's great, because some of these developments, I believe that they want to mix, that maybe you can't build all one bedrooms or you can't build all two bedrooms. And so it seems like up until this point that those constraints haven't been put on you.
They have not. We have in our existing portfolio, we have a handful of 3 bedrooms and we have a number of 1 bedrooms. They all rent very, very easily. But for me, it was just kind of, who is our target renter? Who do we normally rent to? Usually it's either a young couple. Maybe they're just getting started out, but they both have pretty good jobs. The normal income is somewhere between 75,000 and 125 a year combined. Or we get, 2 roommates, similar situation, similar job profile, but they're 2 roommates. And normally, everyone is just, maybe it's the way we finish the apartments or where they're located, but almost everyone is in like that 25 to 45 year range. So I guess that's, for lack of a better term, that's our avatar tenant. And yes, you can get slightly more for a 3 bedroom apartment, but that's a different renter profile. And sometimes those apartments are harder to rent because they're too big for just a couple to rent, and they're too big for 2 roommates. And then you have to get like a 3 roommate situation, or you have to get a small family, which may or may not want to live in an apartment complex next to all these other young professionals.
3 bedrooms want a backyard.
And
that's what we found.
Yeah,
they want a backyard.
Yep. So, and which is not going to be the case here. Everyone will have a balcony or a patio, but it's you're in the urban core of our city. It's not a rural setting.
This is a wonderful project, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you, Brian. There's 2 questions that we ask all of our guests at the end. You've covered the first 3 questions, which is like kind of this whole evolution of where you've been. And I love that you corrected me on the time. I was thinking you sold the wireless in 2004. You were getting into it in 2004. You sold those in 2014, 15. Yeah. So in less than a decade, it's gone from, I'm reading, what is it, Mike Butler? Is that his last name?
Butler's the last name. I think it's Mike, yeah.
But landlording on autopilot, right? Yeah. With his 80 some odd houses, and he's kind of doing the moonlighting thing. And then you're buying that 4 unit that somebody else did the renovations for, and you're learning the management, and then grow that. Now you're shifting the portfolio over to double, triple rents on the short term, but it requires the more management and the more, that's where the leasing and all the surveys and all the customer service and all that. And, the brother joins the mix. You're running on the EOS platform. How are you taking care of you, my friend? Like, how are you keeping your energy high to do this?
Well, if you switch over to my personal Facebook page, you'll see that I'm an avid CrossFitter. So I train every day. Just got done before we jumped on our call here. So I do CrossFit 5 days a week for anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. And then the other 2 days, I call them active recovery days.
Okay.
might be, a several mile hike in the woods with my dogs, or it could be, stretching in like 20 minutes on the assault bike. There we go. some combination of that. So I get a lot of energy from my training regimen. I also am an avid reader. I read for at least a half an hour every single morning, first thing when I wake up. Meditate.
So you basically live 75 hard? Is that pretty much, that's just status quo for you, is almost what I'm getting the sense.
Yeah, I guess. I don't even know. I've never even heard it titled that or know what that is.
You
but
don't,
I guess
need to even. What's that?
I said, I guess
Sorry,
if I fit that profile, then yes, I guess I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now being that I mentioned it, you'll be like, oh yeah. Yeah. You read, water. I think it's 2 workouts a day. Clearly you're. And then how do you keep anything for the donation, giving back? I know you're a family man. You have 3 daughters. Is there any charities that you like to support, or anything else?
Yeah. So over the last, I'll call it 3 to 4 years, we've progressively started donating more and more to local charities in our area. I like to keep it fairly local, only because I like to see the impact of the money that we're donating. So we have a grouping of different organizations that we contribute to. And what's cool is this year we started it's become more of like a family type of endeavor. So slowly but surely we're transitioning so that my wife takes over I call it the foundation. It's not technically a foundation yet, but that's the objective. And then this year we had our 3 daughters become involved as well. So every week they get an allowance, and they put part of their allowance in their donation envelope. And then at the end of the year, they might have only had, I don't know, $40 or $50. But my wife and I told them that you pick where you want to donate it to, and we'll match it with $1,000.
Oh, wow.
So then they got to give away, $1,050, and then they got to pick. So one of them, gave it away to a camp up in the Adirondacks that she likes to go to, so they can give scholarships to other kids that can't go. Another one of our daughters gave it to like a local animal rescue. We actually went on Chewy's website and chose all the different things that we're going to get sent there. And then my other daughter gave it to the local food pantry in our town here. So it was a great experience, and I want to keep building it. That's important to me. It's great.
Brian, the world's a better place with you in it.
Thank you,
we
sir.
appreciate this time you've spent with us and sharing and being open and honest with the journey you've been on and what this new development looks like. I know that I've learned a ton in this episode. I hope all the listeners have as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, pardon, for anybody else who was able to pick up this episode?
Not really. I mean, I'm happy to speak with any of your listeners or kind of share any more of the story or help them out. I've got no problem talking to fellow real estate investors. I kind of enjoy doing that. Like most of us that are in the business, we can't help but talk about it, even when we're not supposed to talk about it. So anybody that wants to send me a message or get a hold of me, they can send me an email. It's brian@greenspringscapitalgroup.com. They can find us on our website, greenspringscapitalgroup.com. And then on Instagram as well, if you want to see some more of the renderings of our future project, it's @GreenSpringsCapital.
Wonderful, man. Wonderful. It looks like a cool project to be able to invest in if that's possible for anybody. I hope they could reach out to you. And thank you again. I wish you a great day.
All right. Appreciate the time, Rob. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Living Well with Rent Well. We hope you loved that episode.
Please be sure to head over to our website at rentwell.com/vision. We're giving away our free program called Vision Through Purposeful Action. If you're a busy person, if you struggle with finding the time and priorities, or if you're experiencing procrastination and overwhelm, this free course will help you with that.
We wish you a blessed day. Thank you for tuning in, and check in later.